billion. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities has estimated that if these cuts are implemented, up to 36 million Americans, including millions of children, would have their health insurance taken away from them. And let's be clear, when we have Republicans in the House passing a budget to make massive cuts in Medicaid, we're not just talking about throwing millions of kids off of the health care they need. We're also talking about massive cuts to community health centers, where some 32 million Americans receive the primary health care that they need, and where community health centers receive 43% of their funding from Medicaid. So a cut to Medicaid, a massive cut to Medicaid, is a cut to community health centers, is a cut to the services that 32 million Americans receive, including many, many seniors. Mr. President, at a time when we have a major crisis in nursing home availability in Vermont and all over this country, let us understand that Medicaid provides for 2 out of every 3 seniors who live in nursing homes. A massive cut to Medicaid is a massive cut to nursing homes and the people who utilize those homes. How many seniors would be thrown out of nursing homes if the Republicans cut Medicaid by $880 billion? Nobody knows, but it would be a disaster for working families and their parents, that is for sure. But it's not just Medicaid cuts that seniors are worried about. Today, Mr. President, nearly 22% of people over 65 years of age are trying to survive on an income of less than $15,000 a year. That is an unbelievable and horrific reality. Imagine anyone in America, in any part of this country, let alone a senior citizen, trying to survive on $15,000 a year or less. And I don't know how anybody can possibly do that, especially seniors who have health care needs and need prescription drugs, need to heat their homes more than the general public. And it's not just seniors trying to get by on $15,000. Half of our nation's seniors are trying to get by on $30,000 a year. Bottom line is that in the richest country in the history of the world, you got millions and millions of seniors today, people who helped build this country, people who raised us. These are people who are barely getting by in the year 2025. Mr. President, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, the United States now has the dubious distinction of not only having one of the highest rates of childhood poverty in the industrialized world, we also have one of the highest rates of senior poverty compared to other wealthy nations. In America today, according to the latest OECD estimates, 23% of seniors are living in poverty compared to just 4.1% in Norway, 6.1% in France, 9.5% in Ireland, and 14.9% in the United Kingdom. That is a dubious distinction. That is something we should not be proud of. That is a crisis we should be addressing. In addition to the poverty that millions of seniors in America are experiencing today, about half of older workers, these are people in the workforce right now, people between the ages of 55 and 64 have no retirement savings at all. You're 60 years old, you've worked your entire life, and half of people in that situation, from 55 to 64, have no retirement savings at all. And as bad as all of that is, many of my Republican colleagues have proposed to make a bad situation, a tragic situation, even worse by cutting Social Security. Some want to cut benefits, others want to raise the retirement age, and then there are some who simply want to privatize Social Security and give it over to Wall Street. Well, Mr. President, I strongly disagree. I don't believe that at a time when millions of seniors are struggling to keep their heads above water, I don't believe that now is the time, in fact, never is the time, to cut Social Security benefits. Instead of cutting Social Security and giving tax breaks to billionaires, Congress must expand Social Security so that every senior in America can retire with the dignity and the respect that he or she deserves. Further, importantly for the younger generation, we must also make Social Security solvent for generations to come. So that is the goal. The goal is to say to seniors all over this country, in the richest country on earth, we're going to address the fact that many of you can't quite figure out how to buy the food you need, heat your homes, get the prescription drugs you need. You are struggling. You help build this country. You are our parents and our grandparents. We stand with you. And that is why, Mr. President, I have introduced legislation today with 10 of my colleagues, Senators Warren, Merkley, Welch, Padilla, Smith, Van Hollen, Markey, Booker, Gillibrand, and Whitehouse, to accomplish both of those goals. This legislation would make Social Security solvent for the next 75 years. It would lift millions of seniors out of poverty, and it would expand benefits for seniors and people with disabilities by $2,400 a year. Now, I know that in a world here in Washington where the government is now run by billionaires, $2,400 doesn't seem like a whole lot of money. But if you're trying to get by on $15,000 a year, you can't afford to heat your house, can't afford to buy a prescription drug that you need, $2,400 is something that will help. How do we do this? What does this legislation do? Well, at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, when billionaires pay an effective tax rate lower than the average worker, this legislation demands that the wealthiest people in America, the billionaires and others, start paying their fair share of taxes. Today, absurdly and unfairly, a billionaire pays the same amount of money into Social Security as somebody who makes $176,000 a year. Billionaire pays the same amount into Social Security somebody who makes $176,000 a year. And that is because there is a cap on the Social Security payroll tax. What does that mean? It means if you make up to $176,000 a year, you pay 6.2% of your income in Social Security taxes. But if you make 10 times more, $1.7 million a year, you pay just 0.62% of your income in Social Security taxes. And if you make $1 billion a year, you pay nothing more into the Social Security fund than someone making $176,000. Now, that may make sense to somebody, probably to the billionaire class, but it does not make sense to me. This legislation applies the Social Security payroll tax to all income, including capital gains and dividends, for those who make over $250,000 a year. Under this bill, 91% of households in our country would not see their taxes go up by one single penny. Not one penny for the bottom 91%. Not only is this legislation good public policy, it also happens to be precisely what the American people want. According to a Data for Progress poll, 81% of the American people, including 79% of independents and 75% of Republicans, support expanding Social Security benefits. So in passing this legislation, it's not only good policy, it is precisely what Democrats Republicans and independents want. Therefore, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S-770, which was introduced earlier today, that the bill be considered read 3 times and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Reserving the right to object, I rise today to discuss Senator Sanders' request for unanimous consent for the Senate to pass his Social Security Expansion Act. Before I do so, I want to respond to a couple of the points that were made. The accusation was once again made that Republicans are trying to cut taxes for billionaires. The reality is Republicans are trying to stop a tax increase on all Americans. The TCJA, or 2017 tax bill, is going to expire at the end of this year, and if it is not stopped from expiring, every American will get a tax increase. And those in the lower income categories and the middle income categories will share $2.6 trillion of that tax increase. That's what the tax fight's about. And then continuing what I call the politics of fear in the face of the reforms that we're bringing, the attack was, well, we're going to cut Medicaid, we're going to stop financing for community health centers, and we're going to do all these terrible things. I have not seen such a bill in this Congress, in the House or the Senate. We are debating how to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. We are not looking at how to cut benefits in Medicaid. And I believe that it's very clear. Today was the first time on the floor that I heard we were looking at community health centers. I wasn't aware of that either. The bottom line here is we are trying to pay attention to our $37 trillion national debt by weeding out waste, fraud, and abuse. We'll have disagreements about how to do that, but it's definitely not going to be all the things that are being brought up that are accused in order to stir people up and scare them and tell them that we should not pay attention to our national debt. Now, with regard to Social Security, we can all agree on the importance of Social Security, which provides monthly benefits to millions of seniors and individuals with their disabilities and their families. I also agree with my colleagues on the other side that Congress must act to preserve and strengthen Social Security to ensure that it's there for current beneficiaries and future beneficiaries. According to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, if no action is taken, the combined Social Security trust funds will be exhausted within the next 10 years, meaning the program would not be able to pay the full amount of benefits currently promised. However, I disagree with my colleagues' approach here today, and they have disagreed with our approaches. We have competing ideas about how we should address this issue. Addressing Social Security's solvency will require thoughtful discussion about a variety of policy options that culminates in a bipartisan solution, not a cram down of a different solution that we haven't even had the opportunity to have a discussion in the Finance Committee about. Instead, my Democrat colleagues are pursuing a live UC of a bill that has not received consideration before the full committee and has never had a Republican co-sponsor in the House or the Senate. This bill would also raise taxes on certain workers making less than $400,000, something my Democratic colleagues have previously promised not to do. For these reasons, I object.
Mr. President.
Senator from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. President, I rise today in opposition of Linda McMahon's nomination to serve as the Secretary of the Department of Education. You know, all across America, from small towns like Grand Marais to cities like Grand Rapids, public schools serve as the bedrock of our communities. As a product of Michigan public schools, the son of a public school teacher, and having watched my own 3 children attend public schools, I know firsthand the importance of public education. Education is the cornerstone of academic achievement, career development, and lifelong